It's been a long time since the last Halo game. Like, a really long time relative to the normal development cycle for this franchise. On average, the Halo series tends to have about a 3-year gap or so between mainline releases, of which Halo 5 was the last. That game came out over 5 years ago now, and while yes, 343 did put out the Master Chief Collection on PC in that time, that was still just a port that was worked on by a few different studios, namely Ruffian Games and Splash Damage. This is the longest development cycle any Halo game has been through ever, even including Combat Evolved. 343 also made it clear that even during the development of the MCC PC port, Halo Infinite was still their primary focus. After the countless delays laden throughout this long development time, Halo Infinite cannot afford to be bad, especially considering 343's history of pushing out half-baked, incomplete products with a release-it-now, fix-it-later mindset that has become all too common in the gaming industry. If Infinite releases as either a buggy mess a la MCC or a content-barren wasteland a la Halo 5, it would be an absolute PR nightmare, no doubt worsened by the fact that 343 is on thin ice already with a sizable portion of the community. But anyway, this isn't what I'm here to talk about today. Instead of speculation about what Halo Infinite might look like, I'm going to talk about a few things that I think 343 absolutely needs to change up in their formula coming from Halo 5. I'm going to try to remain as objective as possible here. So, for example, even though I hate Sprint in Halo, I'm not going to be talking about that because at this point it's just a fact of the game. It's been in the series now for a longer period of time than it wasn't. Instead, I'm going to be talking about some of the serious flaws that Halo 5 had that marred the experience for many fans, both old and new alike, on a more systemic level. Just to get this out of the way so I can establish a little bit of credibility here and make it clear that I'm not just talking out of my ass, I've been a Halo player for well over half my life now. Back when I more regularly played the games, I used to be pretty decent if I do say so myself, in Halo 5 in particular. I got up to Onyx ranking in my ranked playlist of choice by solo queuing for about 95% of that time. For those of you who skipped out on Halo 5, think of this as like high-end rank 50 in Halo 3 or Grandmaster in Overwatch. Now, I'm not saying this to flex on the scrubs or suck my own dick or whatever, but rather I want to establish that yes, I know what I'm talking about when it comes to analyzing Halo from both a casual and competitive standpoint. Sticking with competitive talk for a bit, I'm sure it comes as a surprise to basically no one that Halo is not quite the industry-defining powerhouse it used to be. I mean, Halo 2 basically put competitive console shooters on the map, skyrocketing this little esports organization you may have heard of known as MLG into the mainstream. Now, it's hard to say whether a game being good from a competitive standpoint is a driver for player numbers or vice versa. But what is true is that virtually all of the most popular multiplayer games tend to have strong competitive scenes. CSGO, Dota 2, League of Legends, etc. Halo did as well back in its heyday. Hell, in the mid-2000s, Halo 2 had tournaments boasting prize pools with 5 or even 6 digits, and this was back when the concept of professional gaming was still in its relative infancy. And although professional level events are still going strong, and seriously this is one place where I'll give big props to Microsoft for continuing to sponsor these, viewership has been in a rather sharp decline over the years due to a general lack of community interest. And I think here is where we can find one of the major problems. While it is nice and all that Halo 5 is showing some promise at the top end, it does very little in terms of accessibility for smaller local tournaments, which are the true lifeblood of a competitive game. This brings me to the first thing that Halo Infinite needs to have in order to be more successful than Halo 5. Options for local multiplayer. Halo 5 had no split screen and no native LAN support, both of which are vital to a local scene. While it has been confirmed that Halo Infinite will support split screen, I have yet to find any credible source saying that it will support LAN, which is vastly more important to hosting locals and growing the competitive player base. Online ranked playlists need to be revamped quite a bit as well. At the moment, the ranking system is ludicrously easy to exploit. A few years back, I got one of my friends who had never played Halo before into Halo 5, and we decided to mess around in ranked SWAT with my Smurf account. With us queuing, my Smurf account being in bronze and him being unranked, in an afternoon we were able to boost him up to Onyx by stomping gold, plat, and the occasional low diamond player because the ranking system tried to group us with an average of our rank. Plainly and simply, this should not be possible. I have a couple solutions to this problem. Firstly, assuming Infinite has a ranked system similar to Halo 5, which is rather likely considering it's the same ranking system almost all Halo games have used since Halo 3, do not let players that are ranked queue with unranked players. This is especially important for brand new accounts that don't have any underlying MMR that would help determine their placement otherwise. Additionally, players that are ranked too far apart should not be allowed to queue together, let's say any more than a division or so away from each other. So a gold player will still be able to queue with a plat or silver player, but they wouldn't be able to queue with a diamond or bronze player. There also needs to be some better detection for Smurf accounts. 343 claims that they have systems in place to prevent them, but that doesn't really seem to be the case, since neither I nor other high-level SWAT players that I knew who also smurfed back then ever received a ban or had any action taken against us at all. Really, something like this ought to throw off some sort of flag in their system when I'm going from literally 0 kills several games in a row to completely stomping the competition and doing this consistently. Both I and other people doing this should have been detected by the system 343 claims to have, and had those accounts or even our consoles suspended from ranked for the season. Okay, taking a complete and utter 180 now, let's talk about the casual experience. Halo 5 was a game that was built to be competitive first and fun second, evidenced by the general lack of casual focused game modes both at launch and even late into the game's life cycle. I cannot overstate how much of a mistake this was, since while it is important to make sure a game is fun on a competitive level, it is far more important to make sure casuals can enjoy it as well, since those are going to be the majority of players. For example, if we take a look at Halo Tracker's stats for ranking by population, we can see that a very significant pool of players tracked by the website, roughly 40 to 60% depending on playlist, start but do not finish the 10 placement matches required to be ranked. Additionally, this does not even account for players who don't touch ranked at all, as they would not be tracked by the website. Anyway, with that established, Halo 5 does only what seems to be the bare minimum to offer a decent, I guess, casual experience. Fan-favorite game modes such as Infection and Big Team Battle were absent when the game launched, and in general there was a lack of objective-based modes at all. Even now, Infection isn't always available and is part of the weekly rotating playlist. And Big Team is essentially a collection of community maps because 343 can't be bothered to actually make any on their own. Additionally, 343 seems to have a tendency to not release Forge mode on launch, and this has been the case for both MCC and Halo 5. The result ended up being a severe neutering of the custom games community, something that was an absolutely massive player retention tool in previous titles. This also wasn't helped by the fact that the Xbox One is a much less social platform than the 360 was, considering the move away from game chat in favor of parties and sending out messages to all friends and recent players became a bit more obtuse to do than it was on Xbox 360. Thankfully, however, with talks of implementing a customs browser to MCC and the existing customs browser in Halo 5, we may see some of that community return if that says anything about Halo Infinite. The last thing I want to talk about today is customization. I talked a little bit about what we know for Halo Infinite's armor situation in my previous Halo video, so I'm going to try and avoid just talking about the same things today. As I'm sure we all know, armor customization in Halo 5 was easily the worst in the entire series, excluding Combat Evolved and 2 since it wasn't a thing at all back then. While we do know that Infinite's customization systems will be a step up from that if we take 343 at their word, and it's supposed to resemble something similar to the excellent way that Reach handled this, there is still a lot that we just don't know. My primary concern isn't so much what armor we're going to be getting, although I am a little concerned about that. 343 has shown that they are more than capable of making hideous looking armor, but rather I'm worried about how we will actually obtain it. Halo 5's system was pretty horrendous. The RNG loot box stuff was actually the worst way that they possibly could have implemented armor unlocks. I don't really see them bringing this system back because it was pretty widely hated. On the other hand, the Battle Pass system that MCC has implemented isn't particularly appealing to me either, especially the way it was utilized when Reach was first added. Everyone was railroaded down the same path, so for months after launch almost everyone looked the same as they all had the same armor unlocked around the same time. While the Battle Pass system is objectively an improvement over the complete RNG of loot boxes, I still don't think it's a particularly engaging or fun way to unlock new armor. What I would personally like to see would be a combination of Halo 3 and Halo Reach's unlock systems, but I don't really see that as being a realistic possibility, especially considering Infinite will have a free-to-play multiplayer and they're going to have to make their money somewhere. I don't hate Halo 5, and I don't hate 343. I just want them to learn from the problems that the game had so that they can make the next Halo as good as they possibly can going forward. If Halo is ever going to try and regain the cultural relevance it once held, 343 cannot afford to keep making the same mistakes. While what we have seen of Halo Infinite seems rather promising, particularly the apparent return to a more traditional art style, we have seen absolutely nothing as far as multiplayer gameplay goes. This concerns me, considering the game was supposed to come out a few months ago, and even its new release date isn't that far off. Am I being overly cautious? Maybe, but we've been burnt by 343 before, let's just hope it doesn't happen again.